Hello, my name is Christian Jones and I'm a journalist within Manx Radio's newsroom. Now, the Baton of Hope has completed its visit to the Isle of Man, marking the start of an initiative hoped to be the biggest suicide awareness and prevention campaign in the British Isles. The campaign is spearheaded by Mike McCarthy, a former BBC and Sky News journalist who lost his son Ross to suicide in 2021. Bereaved Survivors of Suicide Isle of Man is a support network which helps those affected by suicide. Its founder, David Higson, says the link-up has come at the perfect time, given Tynwald has just approved the suicide prevention strategy.
It was great to see a lot of the politicians yesterday and they're supporting the Baton, and obviously it's been through Tynwald. Listening to some of the debate in Tynwald myself on the radio, I was grateful for how they presented it and how they respected the strategy and how they backed it. And I'd seen nothing but positive feedback from politicians and everybody about the strategy. And I can't wait for us all to get down sort of the nuts and bolts out, as it were, of the strategy and get it into place and get things changing on the island, saving some more people, because we don't want to lose anybody else to suicide at all.
A presentation was held towards the end of last week to discuss the purpose of the Baton's visit to the island and identify some of the impacts that suicide has on society. Various political figures attended, with almost the entirety of the Council of Ministers listening to the tragic stories and devastation caused. Worldwide, it's estimated a person dies by suicide every 40 seconds, which equates to 800,000 people each year. The presentation provoked an emotional response from the audience, which was also compiled of representatives from mental health charities, psychological initiatives and the police, as well as members of the public who have themselves been affected by suicide. In 1961, suicide was decriminalised and there was emphasis on stopping using the word committed when describing a death by suicide. The Baton of Hope was brought to the island to coincide with the Isle of Man TT, and it was taken to the start line of the races on the 7th of June and displayed around the grandstand, where it received a welcome response from riders and the public alike. Further into the evening, 2 stage slots were booked at Bushy's Festival in the Villa Marina Gardens, as Mr Higson explains.
We took the Baton down there. We all spoke and the crowd were very receptive to the Baton. There was a lot of enthusiasm in the crowd about changing the state of suicide and how it affects, and people are eager to stamp it out and make things better on the Isle of Man and in the UK. It's the biggest killer of men under 35 in the UK at the moment, which is a staggering and awful statistic that needs changing. And as you know, on the Isle of Man, we're above the UK rates at the moment, slightly above them. So that message applies here too, and the enthusiasm for the crowd. They were listening, they were engaging, they were cheering and clapping. It was just incredible. We're so grateful for all the support we received yesterday with the band. It was an amazing experience. And I don't know, I slept last night because it was, I'm still buzzing off it, I must say. It was incredible.
Mr McCarthy spoke at length about the statistics of suicide as he prepares to take the Baton on a journey of 12 cities in 12 days. It's travelling to Glasgow first and then will make its way to Westminster. I sat down with him to find out more.
Suicide is something that I think has been a societal catastrophe for many years. The figures have stagnated for 15 years or more, and certainly as far as the Baton of Hope's concerned, we want to see change. We think it's time to change, it's time to talk, it's time to smash the stigma around suicide, which is still huge. You know, you still hear people talking about committing suicide, and that word commit goes back to a time pre-1961. You know, here we are more than 60 years later, and we're still using that phrase, which refers to a time when it was illegal. It's not just the language. We think in every sector of society there are changes that we can make in education, in the media, in politics, in the health service. And one of the things, you know, about Baton of Hope is that we want to get across the message that it's for everybody. Suicide isn't something that happens to someone else. It can happen to anybody. And we've got a universal responsibility. Every one of us can do something. whether you're at the highest levels of government formulating suicide strategy, suicide prevention strategy, or it's just an extra text to your mate to say, how are you really today?
And the Baton's going to be visiting 12 different cities after it leaves the island. Can you just talk to me about some of the cities it's going to be going to?
Yeah, we're starting in Glasgow on June the 25th. We chose Glasgow because it's got a disproportionately high number of suicides. And what's going to happen in each of those 12 cities is that the baton will be carried primarily by people who've lost a loved one to suicide or by people who've survived a suicide attempt as a moment of awareness and reflection, a moment to be able to tell the world that although, I may have gone through this awful, awful tragedy, I want to reach out to people who are in that same dark place as my son, my daughter, my mum, my dad, and tell them that we do care. I think people very often don't realise that they are far more loved than they believe. There are far more people who want them to stay than they sometimes believe. So we're trying to talk to people who find themselves in a dark place and say, stay. There are armies of us out here who want you to stay. We care about you. What's happened with bringing the Baton of Hope to the Isle of Man, because this is the first really public preview of the tour, is that we've recognised that people are ready to talk about this. They are ready to embrace the idea and to move towards a zero suicide society.
And as we've just heard there, that Tynwald has approved the suicide prevention strategy. The Baton is going to be finishing in Westminster, which is obviously where the UK government lives. Do you think that there's that same appetite within Westminster?
Well, we'll have to see. I think there certainly is starting to be greater openness to the idea of a zero suicide society, for certain. And MPs have flocked to the idea of taking the Baton of Hope around. And, well over 100 MPs have signed up and have joined, actively joined the campaign through our website. So that's a really encouraging sign. But, I always say to people that although, I and my family and hundreds of thousands of others are going through this terrible grief, I don't want sympathy. I want change. We need to change the system because, as I say, those figures haven't changed for 15 years. So we have to look at ourselves, be honest with ourselves, ask what it is we're not doing that we should be doing. And I think this is really starting a sea change in how people look at suicide prevention. And the Isle of Man have been so warm and so welcoming. The TT races have been absolutely incredible. The bereaved survivors of suicide on the island have been, welcoming. It's just been so incredible the way that we've been embraced. We couldn't have imagined that we would get such a huge response here from people. And we'll be leaving the island with hope in our hearts because of what we've seen and what we've felt here.
Campaigners are clear that suicide prevention is a societal effort and shouldn't be left to governments, health bodies and the third sector alone to manage. The presentation closed with a quote from Schindler's List: "Whoever saves one life saves the world entirely."
Thank you for making it to the end of the Little Manx Radio newscast. You are obviously someone with exquisite taste. May I politely suggest you might want to subscribe to this and a wide range of Manx Radio podcasts at your favourite podcast provider so our best bits will magically appear on your smartphone. Thank you.